And that is the key. The key these days is, with all the music in your library, if I can say to you, if you like Jack Johnson, you may like this person that you've never heard of, and you absolutely fall in love with that artist, the company that can actually do that in a great format will win, because there's nothing better than discovering new music that you love.
What's poppin', y'all? Welcome to the Industry Plant documentary. And in this video, we're going to be covering how industry plants are built, manufactured, funded, and then ultimately distributed to the masses. Some of you may be asking the question, well, what is an industry plant? And the definition is an artist that is made to appear as independent and have an organic come up and fan base, but has really been funded the entire time and or secretly signed to a record label. When we dive deeper into this topic, the definition definitely needs to be expanded to not just signed to record labels, because some artists are signed to other entities that operate in the same capacity, if not more powerful. It is deception and screams inauthenticity, especially if you're an artist yourself and recognize that there's no way someone comes out of the gate with a polished sound, look, and appeal without making several iterations while growing a fan base over an extended period of time. The moment when the term industry plant really went from a handful of people who closely followed music using it to a really big thing was with the rapper named Rory. Rory was an individual who came into the music industry around 2014, but the way he came in was so fishy it had red flags all over it. Before he had ever released a project, his song God's Whisper was already on the soundtrack to the movie Lucy. He had co-signs from Jaden Smith, Mac Miller, Wiz Khalifa, and Kanye West, all without even having 10,000 followers on Twitter by the time his first project Indigo Child released. And from there, it's like everything accelerated. He was on the radio, he got all these interviews, he had a Billboard write-up in March of 2014, where he premiered his first song, God's Whisper. It was announced much later that he signed to Columbia, but when people uncovered pictures from his old Instagram, he was at Sony offices a long time before that. And the fact he was signed was hidden to fake an organic come up, which we will dive into later. I know you've probably asked yourself the question, where did this artist come from and why am I seeing them everywhere? At least once in the past couple of years. And we're going to explore the entire system in place to push out these industry plants, and this video will cover many different artists and mainly the systems in place, but who better to start with than global superstar who has had a very dark cloud about her come-up story, Billie Eilish. I personally did not think Billie Eilish was an industry plant for a long time because she was a signed artist. Nobody was trying to hide that fact, so it seemed like, the normal record label decided to push this young artist they had, and it ended up working phenomenally well. There was no deception there, but there is a lot that happened with Billie Eilish before she was signed that made me reconsider. Let's go over how Billie Eilish initially blew up or got on people's radar. And for that, I'll be referencing a YouTuber by the name of Progress's video on accusing her of being an industry plant. I'll have his channel and video linked in the description. You should definitely check it out.
A lot of people who know Billie's music obviously know that the song that blew her up was Ocean Eyes, but I have a feeling a very small amount of people actually know how Ocean Eyes came to be. What I found was, a complicated mess, I guess I'd say. Billie explains how Ocean Eyes came to be in two completely different ways between two separate interviews. In her interview with Vogue magazine, she says this: "Last year, one of my teachers asked if I would either write a song or have my brother write a song to choreograph a dance to. And I was like, yes, that's such a cool thing to do. Then my brother came to me with Ocean Eyes, which he had originally written for his band. He told me he thought it would sound really good in my voice. He taught me the song, and we sang it together along to his guitar, and I loved it. It was stuck in my head for weeks. We kind of just decided that that was the song we were going to use for the dance. But in her interview with Interview Magazine, she said this. It was weird because we didn't plan for it to do anything really. The reason we put it out when we did was that the whole song was meant for my dance teacher, because he wanted to do it for a dance. That's why the production is dance-esque, contemporary, and lyrical. And then it was done, and we were gonna wait until Friday to put it out, and thought, screw it, let's just put it out now. So in one interview, she claims that Ocean Eyes was a pre-made song by her brother, and that the production was already completed to be able to do a dance to for her dance teacher. But in another interview, she claims that the song was basically made specifically for the dance, and that all of the production was to go for the dance. Very different replies, in my opinion.
I don't personally chalk that up as a lie by Billie, and I will never call her or her brother liars when it comes to this video, because from all the research that I've done, they haven't really lied yet, unless you consider omission lying, which I do not. But we know this all starts with this one song, Ocean Eyes, that her brother wrote for her, so that's where our journey begins. A good example of the narrative that is driven by media and Billie Eilish's team of her come-up story is this excerpt from a W magazine article titled "Meet Billie Eilish, Pop's Terrifying 15-Year-Old Prodigy." Eilish and Finneas spent a week recording the song. "We just sat in his room dancing to it," she recalled, and uploaded it to SoundCloud simply to have a shareable link for Eilish's dance teacher. Then the blog Hilly Dilly picked it up, and that led to Beats One tastemaker Zane Lowe voicing his support, and the track went viral. After a day, it had 1,000 plays, and we were like, "We made it," she said. "We didn't think it would go past that. We literally just thought it was because my popular friend reposted it." Isn't it incredible how quickly everything goes up? But even they said they weren't sure it would get more than 1,000 plays because their popular friend reposted it. And I don't know about you, but I don't think a blog picking something up will lead to suddenly getting the support of Beats One, Zane Lowe. But in this small paragraph, a lot of material we have to dig into, starting with before Ocean Eyes, and any label or industry connections Billie or her brother Finneas may have had. Billie Eilish and Finneas managers during the release of Ocean Eyes, and still to this day, are Brandon Goodman and Danny Rukeson of Best Friends Music. You can see both are still on the roster on their webpage. This is just a funny coincidence if you decide to look at it like that, but Danny Rukeson was a musician who was signed to Fueled by Ramen, that was a record label started by John Janik, who moved on and has been the chairman and CEO of Interscope Records since 2014, the record label that Billie Eilish is currently signed to. He said so himself in an interview on Polestar. Perhaps the most important thing I found in my research is that Danny played trombone in the Hippos. Oh boy, that's true. We were the first release on Fueled by Ramen, which was owned and run by John Janik, who is now chairman CEO of Interscope. And then in addition, we signed to Interscope a couple of years later, well before John's tenure. But it's just kind of a fun circular moment for me personally. How does Danny Rukeson even get into contact with Billie Eilish and her brother Finneas? Well, in an interview with Music Business Worldwide, they asked, "First things first, how did you start working with Billie Eilish?" Billie writes everything with her brother, Finneas O'Connell. Years ago, he reached out to me about working with a producer client of mine. He sent me a very funny, sort of cavalier email. It caught my attention as it said, "Eric Mother Effin' Palmquist," which was hard to ignore. I listened to the music that he was writing and producing, and I thought it exceptional, especially at his age, at 17 or 16. I connected him with my client, and they ended up working together on 4 songs. Over time, Finneas and I became friends, and I guided him a little bit with what he was doing with his band, a local kind of garage pop band. And then when he kicked off what he was doing with his sister, the music he was making perked up my ears. Ocean Eyes drove all of us to take notice. The next day I was with Finneas and his family with Billie, meeting everybody, talking about what they wanted to do. The song had already crossed into viral territory overnight. We discussed whether or not this was something Billie was really interested in doing or just a hobby, and we got to know and understand Billie. It was still early stages, but she had a vision of how she wanted what she was going to do to be put out into the world. Okay, so far this doesn't seem too bizarre. The band that Finneas had was called the Slightlies, and it's not like he reached out to some massive producer. in the case of Baby Keem, who said he randomly sent a beat pack to TDE, and they decided to put it on the Black Panther soundtrack. This wasn't an instant relationship, as Finneas was working with this producer Eric Palmquist, who's still signed to Best Friends Music, as you can see on the writer-producer section of their webpage. How were you able to segue from Finneas asking for a producer to managing him and Billie? It was a year in the process. He reached out, I connected him with my producer client, they worked on an EP together, and it took time for them to finish it. Then he'd ask my advice on how to release it, who to release it through, what new media outlet to release music with. He didn't have much guidance in the industry, so I helped him along the way. I wasn't doing it because I wanted to manage him, it was just because I saw a very talented kid who had something great going on and I wanted to help him. Obviously, because my producer worked on it, I felt it was the responsible thing to do as well. The moment where things start getting confusing and we get conflicting stories is when Ocean Eyes happens. What they say in the Music Business Worldwide article is, Finneas had, obviously enough, also been writing songs with his sister Billie Eilish, including debut track Ocean Eyes, which he sent to Rukeson in 2016. Ocean Eyes drove all of us to take notice, remembers Rukeson. The next day I was with Finneas and his family and with Billie, meeting everybody and talking about what they wanted to do. The song had already crossed into viral territory overnight. This song was released in 2015 though, and if you remember in the W magazine quote, it said that the blog Hilly Dilly picked it up and the next day it had 1,000 plays. So this all happened in 2015, not 2016. Now, what the hell is Hilly Dilly? Well, it is now defunct, but it was a music discovery blog. In an interview with Elevator Mag, founder says, "It's a really simple idea," says Hillard, "a place to share music with friends." Hilly Dilly was founded in 2007, and 6 years later, Hillard was approached by someone wanting to rebuild the site, who would then become the lead developer of Hilly Dilly, Felix Gertler. This update allocated for more editorial work and playlists personally curated by Hillard. The partnership worked well at the beginning because it was important to both of them that there were no advertisements on the site. Hillard said that Hilly Dilly was never about generating clicks or sharing a song just because it was put out by a famous artist. Just, here's a dope song, take it or leave it. We don't care about our stats, we don't care if you come back. It's just people sharing great songs. The site had traffic but never really made any money. They tried to start a record label in 2016, but it was shut down within a year. And by April 2020, the entire site was shut down. A site that was responsible for finding artists like Daniel Caesar, Lorde, Halsey, and Billie Eilish. Since the site is dead, you can't go to the link for the initial Eilish post, but I was able to get a screen capture for it, and this is what it looked like. The article was published sometime after the second week of November in 2015, and it reads, "Time and time again, we mean it when we say that one track is all it takes for a career to be set." Almost like they knew. For Billie Eilish, a singer-songwriter from Los Angeles, she's not just one track evidencing our claim though, but two. Sure, they're not instant radio hits, but how pure and unadulterated they sound will really take people by storm. On Ocean Eyes and Fingers Crossed, the two excellent tracks, the songwriter shows she has one of the most pristine vocal tones you ever may hear. This is especially the case on Ocean Eyes. She's only a total of 3 tracks to her name thus far, but the talent she's showing here on these two is obvious. And there's no doubt in our minds that once the word gets out about her, she'll be scooped up. There is absolutely no way Danny Rukeson, who was close to Finneas, had no idea this song dropped until 2016. There is a totally separate article that gives some criticism to the blow-up of Billie Eilish, as well as the blog Hilly Dilly, and the writer says, "What's never remarked upon in the Billie Eilish origin story is that the blog Hilly Dilly," here is Eilish's first post, this is the post I showed just now, and certainly a number of others, are written by kids underpaid by record labels to be cheap A&Rs with little disclosure of their major label connections. Instead of blogs existing as they did in the 2000s, mostly independent outlets where people posted songs they liked, Hilly Dilly simply was a proxy for Interscope's marketing efforts. I harp on this because when the song was released, Eilish was already more connected to the music industry than many artists will ever be in their entire lives. This is a good point made, but it was the owner of the site, Chad Hillard, who wrote the article about Billie Eilish, and he currently does not work for Interscope, nor do I think he's ever officially worked for them. But funny enough, someone from Interscope just happened to see that blog post. In an interview with Darkroom CEO and manager Justin Lubliner, who Billie Eilish is also signed to, his record label Darkroom is partnered with Interscope. The article says, he found Billie after she uploaded a song to SoundCloud, Ocean Eyes, which was picked up by blog Hilly Dilly. An Interscope intern who also wrote for the blog showed it to A&R player Nick Groff, who shared it with Lubliner, who then met with Billie's management team. I think the SoundCloud on Ocean Eyes only had a few thousand plays, he says of this very early period. Within 1 second of hearing it and seeing her photo, it just clicked. My radar went off. I felt like this was the artist that I've been searching for my entire career. I was going to make sure I did everything possible to work with her. This gives credence to the point that these labels have cheap interns that are supposedly A&Rs working at these blogs doing music discovery, because there are too many individuals from Interscope surrounding Billie Eilish before Ocean Eyes even takes off for it to be a mere coincidence. And this is all still in 2015. There isn't enough proof to say that Interscope used this blog as a proxy to just make it seem like an organic rise for her song, but it is enough to start asking questions. And we need to take a deeper look at the CEO of Darkroom and her manager, Justin Lubliner. Justin Lubliner put up a picture on Instagram with Eilish on August 30th, 2016 with the caption, "Billie Eilish is nothing short of amazing. She's captivating, beautiful, and a phenomenal songwriter. I'm so incredibly excited that last night she signed to Darkroom/Interscope Records, and I finally get to work with her and her awesome team. Oh, and she's only 14. So this guy found out about Ocean Eyes through the article on the blog that was shown to him by someone who was an intern back in November of 2015. And she isn't officially signed or announced that she signed until the end of August 2016, 9 entire months later. First off, who the hell is Justin Lubliner? And that in itself is an interesting story. He's an individual that doesn't do many interviews, and it's hard to find anything on him. He had a story with Hits Daily Double that does a decent job at covering his own come up. He didn't grow up in a particularly musical household. The son of a doctor and a shoe designer, recalls being super inspired by New York's hip-hop music and culture growing up. Nas and Jay-Z were my favorite artists. Illmatic was my favorite album, and DJ Premier was my favorite producer. I remember falling in love with DJ Premier's signature vinyl scratches at 12 and wanting to learn how to make that noise. So my dad bought me turntables for my bar mitzvah, and I started collecting hip-hop records after school. I became a DJ at 14, playing at hip-hop clubs across the city. I became obsessed. When Lubliner was 15, he started hanging out at Def Jam Records. I remember being outside of L.A. Reid's office one day when Kanye and Jay-Z were in a meeting and thinking, that's what I want to do when I get older. A couple of bells should start ringing from just this paragraph. The first for me was his interest in hip-hop, particularly 90s hip-hop in the early 2000s. And I don't know about you guys, but the perception that I've had of Billie Eilish fashion and style the instant I had seen her always came across as similar to that. The baggy clothes, the type of shoes, even the shades. She basically dresses like Biggie a lot of the time. Another thing that made me take a second read was when he said he was outside of L.A. Reid's office one day when Kanye and Jay-Z were in a meeting. How does a teenager even get into a position like that? And after some digging, I was able to find out. In an article with Billboard, it reads, even at his young age, Lubliner has been chasing this kind of success for more than a decade. Growing up in New York City, he DJ'd at teen nights and retail stores to earn spending money for sneakers and vinyl records, and soon began managing local DJs himself. He sparked a friendship with the son of former Island Def Jam music group chairman CEO L.A. Reid in high school, and spent many afternoons hanging out at the Def Jam office, where he once witnessed Jay-Z and Kanye West stop by, and where he later interned. My interest in music, business, and DJing all came together when I saw L.A. Reid in his office with my favorite artists of all time. Lubliner remembers, I had this light bulb moment of, that's what I want to do. The son of L.A. Reid that he's most likely talking about is Aaron Reid, who is the only son of L.A. Reid that is in the same age range for them to meet. And the article tries to paint his come up sort of as a rags to riches story, The odd part is that if you look at Justin's LinkedIn, you would see that the high school he went to was the Horace Mann High School, and the high school Aaron Reed went to was the Dwight School, after he had done a year in boarding school. But maybe all the rich kids just run in a small circle, because both of these high schools run you 50 grand or more a year. So Justin Lubliner was a rich kid for sure. It wasn't until his time at USC that he figured out starting his own business would be a good idea. And in this very rare interview from 2014, he talks about his beginnings.
Started working with Nicky and Hardwell when I was a junior in college, and I was given the lucky opportunity to start somewhere low with them. Hardwell likes to say with me, "Started from the bottom, now we're here." But it was fun. I mean, they're the two clients that we've been working hand in hand together since the beginning. When Hardwell first started with his management company, is when I came on, and I think Nicky was at 17,000 likes on Facebook or something, low like that. So it's been a growing experience for everybody, learning on how to develop myself as a publicist and someone who handles a lot of marketing, and watching their growth as well. So it's been a great relationship, and easy for me to access the consumers and the fans because I grew up with them, having my musical taste evolves and being a fan at Ultra for the past 3 years. So I really get to understand what these people are feeling and go through it together with them.
How do you, as a junior in college, get the attention of up-and-coming international dance music superstars like Nicky Romero and Hardwell, enough to make them your clients?
It was for me, I'd always wanted to be in the music industry, so I had my eyes set on a goal, and that was to start my own business within. And early on, I was doing a lot of passion projects, everything from internships to starting my own blog, and we had started a blog, pretty early in the stages of online media blogging, so we had a great reputation for that, and I found myself in the position where I can offer something mutually beneficial to a bunch of these managers and agents, in that I could post their artists on my website, which at the time was one of the first Hype Machine published electronic music websites. So from there, we started managing artists, we started talking to managers, and at the time I'd realized, quite early that electronic music was such a growing genre, and that it really was just based online, and a lot of the connections that we had and the ideas that we had were to grow an artist's exposure online. So utilizing the connections that we had in management projects and the blog, we kind of just created from thin air this forward-thinking, fully functional digital marketing, PR, branding community, which consisted of myself and leaning on a bunch of my contemporaries from USC, where I went to school, to help me with photos and videos and design concepts, and just being in a very creative atmosphere. And from thin air, we kind of just pushed and pushed and pushed, put pitch decks together. We reached out to a bunch of agents and managers that we were working closely with, and eventually landed Nicky Romero after I think 4 or 5 months of negotiation. From there, it kind of just snowballed into something a bit bigger. So that's kind of how we started.
What he's talking about here is how he got to manage and break very popular EDM artists like Nicky Romero and Hardwell, and that is the scene that he was working in for a very long time until Billie Eilish. This guy was a hard worker and clever as well. He was working at Live Nation while he was in college and was known as the EDM guy because of his blog Chubby Beavers and how much he would talk about it. Back then, blogs were the best place to spread EDM music since these massive publications hadn't picked up on it yet, and he was able to get a lot of contacts with different agents and managers for these DJs. Eventually, he would get into contact with Hardwell and Nicky Romero, and over 4 months of back and forth, he finally convinced them to let him work with them, and he took very little commission, and it was a trial basis for a certain period of time. And he also did some creative marketing efforts that sort of changed the paradigm of how people in that section of the industry looked at marketing and PR.
But for us, with Nicky in the beginning, it was developing on his social media. It was getting him on video concepts. It was sending people on tour to photograph him and doing videos that were a little outside the box, documentary series, stuff like that. That really made us stand out as publicists because we were offering more services than just PR. One of the things that we started with Hardwell early on, which I got in a lot of trouble for, was we were really kind of like the first people who did like for downloads. And there was a like for download that we had done around Electric Zoo 2012 where we had given away this kind of like Lord of the Rings gift set of a bunch of bootlegs that we had done over the past 5 years, and a bunch of those were from other artists, and they got a little upset. That's when we stopped doing it. But just little things that are now kind of cliche and of the norm. I feel like we're in the beginning, the first people on top of those, and that helped us with PR and getting things out there.
Justin transitioned into more of a consultant role at Casablanca Records, then A&R from the beginning of 2013 onwards. And funny enough, of all people this guy discovers and brings to the forefront, one of the early ones at his new position at the record label was none other than Martin Garrix.
So that was really exciting. With Martin Garrix, it was a bit more spontaneous. I'd actually found a video of him on Facebook tagging himself on one of Hardwell's management team's profile, and it was a video of him in the crowd at an I Am Hardwell show doing a selfie, and it was like Hardwell's playing my new song, Holy Shit. And I'd heard that song, and I immediately downloaded the mix, and I saw it said IDID, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was a Martin Garrix track. And really, really early on, I think this is over a year ago, I'd sent that into Universal, and I said, look, this track is not only unbelievable, no one knows about it, it's unreleased, it's called Animals by Martin Garrix. The kid's an absolute superstar. He's got the look, he's got the personality, he's got the energy, and we really got to do something about this. And at the time, we had just lost out on an opportunity because we waited too long. The opportunity was a guy called Chris Malinchak, and the song was called So Good to Me, which is an artist that I found earlier as well. And I was like, look, we need to sign this right now. This is the next major hit. And from there, right away, negotiations started. And luckily for me, one of my closest friends in music became his manager at the same exact time. So it's been an unbelievable experience working with him on marketing concepts and A&R concepts and being around the team. And Casablanca was incredibly helpful for the development of Animals and plugging it to top 40 when instrumental tracks really weren't pushing the boundaries at that point. So it was a really successful situation that I'm proud to have helped out in.
So we know her manager has experience in really taking smaller artists and bringing them to that next level into stardom, if not superstardom, even though it was mostly with electronic acts, and Billie Eilish was more pop. But another article which was more propaganda than it was just coverage was titled, Why All Eyes Are on Billie Eilish, the new model for streaming era success. And while the meteoric success of When We All Fall Asleep blindsided many, it is actually the result of years of meticulous artist development and a well-calculated major label effort to build a career that will last. By releasing so many singles leading up to its release, none of which sound too similar, and all of which showcase Eilish's chameleonic abilities, she was able to land on multiple genre playlists and be everywhere at once, says Rukasin. There was a moment where artists and songs were living and dying by what playlist they could be on, he explains. We made sure to be the standout on different ones, as Justin Lubliner, who signed Eilish to his Interscope imprint Darkroom in August 2016, says. We made the blueprint for how to be an album's artist in a streaming era. This new model only sounds applicable to an artist that is signed to a major label and has a 16-person team working around the clock to make sure they get every opportunity possible. This isn't feasible for your actual bedroom artist with no connections, which is a recurring theme they try to paint Billie Eilish and her brother as. And this is common of every industry plant. They need a relatable rags to riches type of story, otherwise the fans will not resonate with the artist. In this case, sure, the album was created in their bedroom, but they have a massive team and connections that no other bedroom artist has, which isn't stressed enough. This is the best part of this Billboard article that takes us to the next section of this video. Before building her core team, Eilish had worked briefly with London-based A&R and creative services company Platoon, a partnership that O'Connell had forged, which Apple acquired in 2018. Though she was Apple's Up Next artist in September 2017, has a Beats One show, Grouples Have Feelings Too, and wrote a song with O'Connell for Apple's 2018 holiday commercial. And in a separate article interviewing Justin Lubliner, he even suggests the same thing. Lubliner says that every decision over the past 4 years was part of a meticulous strategy for making sure that people identified her as a real artist with a unique identity, putting out a body of work. Instead of prioritizing singles, the team focused on helping establish an identity for each individual track off her debut album, forging crucial relationships with Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music along the way. For example, Spotify launched a Los Angeles pop-up for the album, which included a separate multi-sensory room for each song. So Billie Eilish was afforded the luxury of being placed on all of these playlists due to strong relationships her team built with every major streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music. And we're going to look more into the London-based A&R and creative services company, Platoon. Because remember when I said that there was a period of about 9 months between when Billie Eilish was first discovered and when she was officially signed? What happened in this period of time is the question. And we sort of get a hint when it tells us in the quote, and she was working with this agency, that she nor her brother ever mentioned their time and what they did for them. But this is far more than just an agency. If you go to Platoon's website, platoon.ai, you're just greeted with visuals in the background and mission possible. There are no details or anything, which is odd of a company like this. It's almost like they don't even want you to know what it is they exactly do. And while many things have come out now, it was incredibly secretive back in July of 2016, when an insider article couldn't get them to spill anything about it, and is the same period of time when Billie Eilish was in the process of signing to Darkroom Interscope. To put it simply, Platoon is an incubator where they give artists the resources, connections, funding, even creative vision to take them from nobody to eventually signing to a major record label and becoming stars. It's an industry plant farm, if you will, that was loosely connected in its inception with the most valuable company in the world and is now directly under that company, which is Apple. Over the past year, London-based Platoon has emerged as one of the world's most nattered about, thought-provoking new music companies, offering a range of distribution, funding, and marketing services to emerging and unsigned artists. The startup has partnered with arguably the two most anticipated new acts of 2018, New York-based Yebba and UK-based Brit Award winner Georgia Smith. Signings like these have made Platoon's A&R hit rate the envy of the major labels. Other artists in its network with millions of streams to their name include the likes of Mr. Easy, Malik Berry, Gabrielle Aplin, and Riley Ritchie, while artists like Billie Eilish and Stefflon Don have been incubated at Platoon before being migrated into major labels. All of the artists mentioned above are wired into modern youth culture, and to various extents have wriggled out of the crosshairs of big spending label A&R departments. The question might be, well, if they aren't signing people to a record label, what is the business model here? And what does Platoon stand to benefit from giving these unproven artists everything and more that they would get from a label? Platoon, launched in 2016, has built on AWOL's original principles, enabling artists to distribute their music independently by adding a wealth of label-like services. These include A&R, signing and developing talent, plus marketing, funding, video editing suites, recording studios, and fiscal business management. In return for these services, unlike major record companies, Platoon does not ask acts to hand over long-term rights to their music. Instead, more akin to a VC investor, it typically obtains a minority stake in an artist's own independent business. I do not think that the intention of this business is to own a small stake in these artists' business, but we'll get into why later. Funny enough, Kanye West was talking about this exact business without even knowing it when he sent out a tweet in August that said, "When I spoke to Katie Jacobs, who's on the board of Vivendi, we decided to create a Y Combinator for the music industry, so artists have the power and transparency to be in control of our future. No more shady contracts, no more lifelong deals." And one of the founders of Platoon replied to the tweet saying, "YC for music talent. Now that's an idea," tagging "We Are Platoon." If you're unfamiliar with what YC or Y Combinator is, it's basically a seed money startup incubator started by Paul Graham, who is a brilliant guy, definitely worth following. But these startup companies in Silicon Valley apply to join through a rigorously competitive application process. And then it's like a school that also has the founders of the companies get offered an amount invested into their company in exchange for a percentage of equity that YC gets. Some of the companies that have come out of this program are Instacart, Stripe, Airbnb, DoorDash, Twitch, which was Justin TV at the time, Dropbox, Reddit, Teespring, Quora, Coinbase, and many, many more. But for a company like this to exist, you need someone with not only experience but connections in the music industry and the entertainment industry, as well as someone with tons of capital to pour into the company. And that's exactly what Platoon did. Platoon was founded by Denzel Feigelson and Saul Klein. One of the founders, Denzel Feigelson, was actually asked the same question we all have had in mind. Can you maybe address the conspiratorial suggestions that keep lingering, that she wasn't just an exciting organic talent in reference to Billie Eilish, but actually some kind of industry plant, a project cooked up between you and Apple? It was honestly a very serendipitous affair. It was us, in our office, finding her on SoundCloud the same day that two people who were working at Apple on Zane Lowe's team also sent me the link. That was Ocean Eyes, and it was undeniable, and it was only on SoundCloud. The two guys at Apple said, look, we know the managers. Oh, wow, they know the managers. And we'd love to hook you up. You should talk to Danny Rukasin, Eilish's co-manager, alongside Brandon Goodman. Within seconds, we called Danny, and he was like, I need to get this out. Can you help us? From there, it was just natural. She had such a wonderful team. The two managers, Brandon and Danny, are incredible. Her mom, Maggie, is incredible. And then, you do what you do. You take her to LA. You take her into the building and she meets everybody. We introduced her to Zayn and Jimmy Iovine and whoever was in that day. So yeah, she got some very early plays at Beats One, but there was no calculated plot. It was just support. But there was support from all kinds of people in the industry because she was undeniable. Not from everybody, obviously. There was months and months where labels didn't really pick up on it. The A&R people didn't pick up on us. But when any artist gets so big, there's always lots of those stories that come out. Nobody sat in a room and said, okay, together we're going to make her the biggest star in the world. We only sat in a room and said, how can we support you? Isn't it such a coincidence that everyone seems to discover a single song on SoundCloud during the same time, both Interscope and Apple? And what he is defining is exactly the suspicion everyone has in their mind. They magically find this one song when they're already connected to the industry. They even said the people at the office knew her management. And then they support her by putting her music in front of an audience of millions upon millions, whilst also trying to make it seem organic while you're doing so. Feigelson has quite the history in music though. He's the individual who was played in the introductory clip to this video and predicted the entire model of Spotify. He's from South Africa, but got into the music industry in the 1980s. In the 1970s, though, he was a bass player in college, studying music therapy, and he was playing in all kinds of bands from salsa to core jazz to experimental electronic, and seeing artists like Sting and The Police influenced him to move towards electric bass from having been a jazz purist. It wasn't until the 80s, though, that he transitioned into producing and managing. He went through the years as a musician himself, and that experience he got from booking shows, driving the van, setting up the gear, making sure everyone got paid, set him up to be a good manager years later. Some of the artists that he managed were Lady Smith, Black Mabazo, Gypsy Kings, Johnny Clegg, Luther Vandross, and Kenny Loggins. But he took a brief retirement when he moved to Hawaii and started an online floral company in the 90s. They would ship local flowers into the United States. But in 1996, a massive idea came into his mind, and he saw the opportunity of the internet to help artists have an alternative to record label contracts, and he started a revolution in the music business. He moved back to California and started Artists Without a Label, which is also known as AWOL, and it was one of the earliest direct-to-fan CD sales sites, and it was a huge success. Instead of being stuck in a contract and getting barely anything for the CDs you sold, these artists had the opportunity to sell directly to their fans and get paid a larger share. AWOL customers could order CDs online for $10 plus postage. Feigelson had the discs stacked up in his garage. AWOL artists would keep ownership of their copyrights and receive the lion's share of the financial proceeds. What the experience with Kenny and the children's album taught me at the time was to do the exact opposite of a record deal, says Feigelson. Instead of a 100-page contract, I created a 1-page contract. Instead of the artist owning 15%, the artist owned 85%. Instead of exclusive, I made it non-exclusive. The next phase of Figelson's life was in 2001, when he was contacted by Steve Jobs and Apple. He became a music consultant and special advisor to Steve Jobs, as Apple intended to move into music with iTunes and the iPod. He would work with Apple to find and license songs for product launches and promotional videos, and then became a key member in launching iTunes initially, as well as around the rest of the world. He worked on projects like the 30-day iTunes Apple Music Festival from 2007 to 2016, Beats, and much more for over 14 years. So this individual has seen the evolution of music consumption for decades upon decades, and worked right alongside one of the biggest shifts in music with iTunes that helped shift from the physical CD model to individuals buying songs and albums digitally. In 2012, Figelson sold his company AWOL to Cobalt Music, the independent publishing company, and he was figuring out his next move when he decided to start Platoon. But the question I have is, did he decide to start it, or was he sort of urged and sent to start it? Because while Platoon didn't start out as being a company owned by Apple, it now is. And it's very convenient that the individual who helped start iTunes also happened to start a company that benefits Apple Music, and it gets acquired by them too. Figelson says himself in a Medium article he wrote, in 2012, AWOL sold to Cobalt, and the original artist-first vision and learnings continue to evolve as I really listen to more and more artists, creatives, fans, and managers. A conversation with Saul Klein instigated the spark to launch Platoon in 2016. At that time too, I had the opportunity of meeting Georgia Smith and her manager after hearing her song Blue Lights on SoundCloud. Once you meet a truly great artist like Georgia, you are inspired and elevated to trust the fearless creative process. Saul Klein himself has quite the history in music, film, and business, who is the business partner to Denzel Figelson when they started Platoon, and on paper is the perfect partner for him to do business with. Saul Klein was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, but would grow up in London, eventually going to school at Cambridge, and from 1993 to 1995 began working at the Telegraph and spent time working at Ogilvy's WPP, which is a marketing and advertising company. During this time, it was the infancy of the internet, and Klein was trying to get these organizations to think about digital. While at Telegraph, he was fortunate enough to meet the guys that started the company Netscape before they went public. He also met a company, Firefly, and their founders that were students out of a media lab at MIT. And when he was considering investing in them on behalf of WPP, they asked him why would he do that when he could just join them, which is exactly what he proceeded to do, and he moved to Boston in February of 1995. And from there, he rode the wave of the internet. He helped them build up Firefly for 4 years, which they then sold it to Microsoft. He would spend some time working at Microsoft in Seattle, which was then the most valuable company in the world, but moved to New York in 1999 and started the Accelerator Group with his father Robin Klein. And this was a company dedicated to investing in early stage internet businesses like e-commerce, digital media, and internet services. One of the companies they invested in was Meetup, that's still successful to this day, as well as the company Blogger, that was bought by Google and made them a ton of money. But in 2002, he left America and moved to London with his wife. In his own words, he needed a job, so he decided to start a company, which was a bad idea at the time. This was the dot-com crash, and all of these internet businesses were failing. But while he was in the US, he was inspired by the Netflix business model and couldn't understand or wrap his head around why something like that didn't exist in Europe and the UK. He even looked for teams that were trying to build something similar, but couldn't find any. So he decided to start it himself, and it was called Love Film. The idea was that him and his father would seed fund the business, and Saul would run it for anywhere from 1 to 3 years, and then they would get someone else to run the business, which is what they did. Years later, in 2011, Love Film was acquired by Amazon for £200 million. After he handed off Love Film to a CEO to run, he was invited to join the beginning stages of the team at Skype as a marketing executive. He loved the business and believed they could overtake other businesses like Vodafone in the future. But they ended up selling to eBay for $4.2 billion, which is a massive amount, but he felt was a bit disappointing. But he spent a year at eBay afterwards from 2007 to 2008, as well as angel investing in music companies like Last.fm, which was one of the first companies online that would build detailed profiles of every individual user's music tastes, and then have a recommendation system in place that would show them new music and artists they haven't listened to that are similar to the taste profile they have built. From 2010 to 2015, Saul and his father founded Local Globe, which operated similar to the Accelerator Group. It was a venture capital firm that invested in technology businesses and raised £45 million in October 2015, and this was the beginning of when he would begin working with and alongside Denzel Feigelson on Platoon. A very important thing to note is how investors look at business from the mouth of Saul Klein himself.
Baseline, investors want to back ideas that can return their fund. And so you need to know what that means. And what that means is you need to know how big is the fund that the investor is investing out of. And in the case of Local Globe, which is the new seed fund we started last summer, it's a £45 million seed fund focused on London, which is tiny by index standards. Index announced today they'd raised $1 billion and 1.25 billion of new capital to invest, so 70 million focused on London is really small. But at the end of the day, the calculation as an investor you're making is if I have 10% of your business and I can hold on to that stake at exit, your business to return my fund needs to be worth 450 million quid at exit, about 700 million.
Very difficult question to answer when the profitability of artists is nowhere near the businesses that Saul Klein has invested in the past. On the surface though, it looks like a great support system for artists. In the run-up to launching Platoon in 2015, Feigelson and Klein held multiple meetings with emergent independent artists to ask what they needed to get their careers motoring in the age of SoundCloud, YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. The duo were told time and time again that these acts had a simple plan, building their presence on SoundCloud and social media to the point that major labels would start flocking towards them. The fundamental idea of Platoon then was to offer a new option, providing the functions and expertise that a major label might inject into an artist's career, but with a deal heavily weighed in favor of the talent. We believe that artists do their best work when they have creative and economic freedom, explains Klein. That's absolutely true in the world of software and business, and it's absolutely true in the world of music. Platoon also has its eyes and ears wide open to other creative sectors, books, video, education, etc., and will look to apply the same model to those industries in the future. Adds Klein, if you're an independent creative today, the economics have tipped in your favor. There are 3.5 billion people with smartphones in the world. By 2020, that will be up to 5 billion. If I look 10 years out, with all of the platforms we already have, and imagining those which are yet to be introduced, I just can't see a world of a dominant major label system. None of this, however, adequately explains Platoon's prolific and prodigious ability to spot and sign talent early, and to associate itself so closely with a new wave of commercially formidable new artists. Take Mr. Easy for example. Platoon helped to fund his various projects and create his video for single Leg Over for under £5,000. Released last year, it's now attracted over 30 million plays on YouTube. MBW understands that the aspirational Platoon deals sees the company offer career-long support, creative freedom, and marketing firepower in exchange for a minority stake in an artist's independent business. The firm also recently launched its own publishing company, allowing it to cross-pollinate in the expansion of an artist's career. For example, an act can take out a publishing advance and recoup it with their master's income. With Klein's background in mind, these kind of structures are no surprise. We've got a long-term perspective on our artists and how the industry is going to change in the coming years, says Klein. In the venture world, if you find someone with a truly great idea, You have to take a 7 to 10 year view. If they do well, you do well. That's the right kind of alignment. Where Klein says this comparison loses its relevancy for Platoon is at the point of the E word, exit. When a venture capitalist invests in a startup, often it's with the hope that a big payday will come down the line via an acquisition. In artist land, that big check is, as we stand today, typically coming from one direction, the major labels. When I see this and Apple's involvement and the long-term planning that they have, it doesn't seem like the intention is just what it is on the surface level. The reason record labels are able to make money is because they own the masters and they get a lion's share of the recording revenue, as well as other avenues, since 360 deals have become commonplace years ago thanks to Leor Cohen. How is a company that is going to take a minority stake in an artist ever even going to come close to making money? And that's where I think the intention is not even making money with the artist. This is just me thinking. If I were Apple Music, these streaming services do not make their money like record labels do. They make their money through the subscriptions that people buy to get access to the music. Now, what is the issue with these subscriptions? Well, the problem is that Apple Music and Spotify need access to these libraries of music that Universal, Warner, and Sony own. They need to pay them a ton of money in licensing to be able to have that music in their library. An artist can't do anything about it because they don't own the rights to their music. But what if, in the future, the majority of artists were independent and owned the rights to their music? Or what if these artists that they help build up and give exclusive content to on Apple Music decide to buy subscriptions to it? Their fan bases were built on these platforms, like Apple Music and Spotify. They would have no reason to take them off because it's making them money. And it's much harder to threaten to take music off on a wide scale if each individual artist owns their masters. If this is the future of the music industry, then Apple Music will have stronger negotiating power when in talks for licensing deals with the three companies that own nearly all of the music. This seems overly optimistic, but in the words of Saul Klein himself, if you're an independent artist today, the economics have tipped in your favor. If I look 10 years out, with all of the platforms we already have, and imagining those which are yet to be introduced, I just can't see a world of a dominant major label system. Apple acquired the company in 2018, and the power that Apple Music has to push an artist is insane. All they have to do is put them in all of these playlists that they own, and they have direct distribution to what is now over 68 million subscribers at the push of a button. Platoon claims that their artists do not get any special treatment by Apple Music or playlists, and it's the same as every other artist, but we are not stupid. Why wouldn't Apple Music use their platform and show preferential treatment to push artists that are signed to a company that they own? After all, they put Billie Eilish as their up next artist, had her talked about on Beats One. They said they put her on all of these playlists spanning different genres, and she became the most pre-added album ever at 800,000, and they gave her an Up Next mini documentary on top of that. Apple has a host of tools at its fingertips to succeed in music. A music analytics company called Asai had shut down in late 2018 during around the same time that Platoon was announced as being acquired by Apple. They put up a post on their Twitter saying, Asai is shutting down on 10/14/18. Dear Asai user, Asai will be shutting down operations on October 14th, 2018. As of that date, you will no longer have access to our API endpoints, the website, or features such as Asai Terminal, Recommend, Artist Analytics, and others. You are welcome to contact us at info@asaitech.com, as our Twitter and Facebook accounts will no longer be active. We will do our best to reply in a timely manner based on the volume of emails. From today until October 14th, our product will be working as is, and we will not be supporting issues with the platform. We've loved watching the artists you've signed, marketing campaigns you've launched, and love of bringing data into this industry you've shown over the past 2 years. With love, Sony Theakanath, CEO and founder, Asai. What happened was, Apple acquired this company and has their founders working for them now. On their Crunchbase it says, Asai is an automated machine learning A&R and music management platform. The company builds tools that make it easier to discover and develop talent. By aggregating and generating insights on the digital footprints of content and talent on the internet, Asai contextualizes and creates structure for music business folks. Asai has built a recommendation engine to quickly identify future and budding hits. Asai offers two products: a music management dashboard for A&Rs to quickly scout and manage talent, and an API for services to integrate a recommendation engine into their platforms. Asai was founded in August 2016 and is based in San Francisco, California. Asai was acquired by Apple in October 2018 for under $100 million. The power in that company and the claims they made are really interesting, answering the question that is likely coming to your mind, which is, why would Apple buy Asai? The obvious reason is analytics. The startup's team and technology could be useful for Apple's continued development of its Apple Music for Artists dashboard, for example. The company previously bought British startup Symmetric for its music metric analytics platform. A story Music Alley broke in 2015. Although Apple Music for Artists did not launch in beta until earlier this year. Asai could play a role in future improvements to the tool, and that's important for Apple Music, since its main rival Spotify is investing heavily in its own analytics and marketing tools for artists. Apple's acquisition of Shazam, which closed last month, this is 2018, can also be viewed through this context. An Apple acquisition of Asai is about more than artist analytics, however. At Midem Lab, Thea Kanath talked about a product called Asai Recommend, which could create algorithmic, personalized playlists, as well as recommend songs and playlists to people based on their listening habits. That could be useful as Apple continues to improve the For You section of Apple Music, with its personalized recommendations and algo playlists like New Music Mix, Favorites Mix, Chill Mix, and Friends Mix. Again, this is an area of intense competition with rivals such as Spotify and YouTube Music. Finally, and most intriguingly, Asai had another product that Thea Kanath talked about during his Midem Lab pitch in June, a tool he described as an automated A&R web platform aimed at labels, managers, and promoters trying to identify breaking artists as early as possible. Thea Kanath claimed that it could identify up-and-coming artists 10 weeks before they hit the charts by analyzing the data from streaming services including Spotify and SoundCloud, with around a 70-30 rate of hits to misses, i.e. it predicted hits 70% of the time. A hit is considered someone you can sign and make a profit out of in some way, or they jump onto a major playlist in some way, he said then. A 70% success rate in guessing hits is insane. And now that information is proprietary, only to Apple, and not any of these other record labels that could pounce on the opportunity. But what use is it if you know something is going to be a hit, but you don't have the resources and creative suite to fully display that artist's music? That's exactly where Platoon comes along. And then in the most recent quote you saw, that Apple also acquired the music discovery application Shazam. So in a 3-month period, Apple acquired an analytics company that can strongly predict hit songs, as well as other analytics valuable to Apple Music and their system of recommendation. They acquired Platoon, that essentially acts like a record label, but giving artists incredibly favorable deals, as well as funding and creative teams. And they acquired Shazam. Back when they acquired Shazam, the application had over 150 million monthly active users, and was usually used to discover the name of a song you just found or were hearing somewhere. This is another powerful marketing tool because you can now find an artist, the seed that may or may not become a star, through the analytics company, bring them into Platoon that nurtures and plants the seed, making sure to water it and grow it. Then you put it on all of these Apple Music playlists, as well as push it to the audience or audiences that you have on Shazam, and that is the market you're going to sell that plant to. This sounds great, but I can show you better than I can tell you with several examples. Isaac Dunbar is an artist signed to Platoon, and the most popular song and music video he has on his channel is Ferrari, released on June 11th, 2019, with nearly 2 million views. he's in the Apple ecosystem. If you go to the comments, however, you'll find a ton of people saying they found out about his music through Shazam. Nobody, not even a single soul. Shazam. When Shazam randomly recommends this to you. I found this through turning on Pop Shazam, and this is amazing. Shazam pop-up thing brought me here, and many more. You can just look it up yourself. Another more recent individual under Platoon is an artist by the name of Aaron Smith. The first easy thing to notice is that his most viewed song on his YouTube channel, Your Turn Now, which is a live session, has 130,000 views and only 451 likes. That type of ratio of views to likes is nearly enough to say that these are not organic views. That doesn't mean they're fake, but they could have just come from ads. The individual has around 5,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel at the time of recording, and on Instagram has about 6,000 followers. It's totally not preferential treatment that he has an entire At Home with Aaron Smith session promoted by Apple Music, is it? Or what about the fact that he was on Best New Pop on BBC Radio 1? Or Apple Music wanting to talk to you about the story behind your track Unconditional as exclusive content for their service. Being placed on Apple Music's Today's Hits playlist, we haven't even gotten to Spotify too, where if you look at his About page, every single playlist he was discovered on is a Spotify editorial playlist. And he has 551,000 monthly listeners while I'm making this, and only 7,000 followers. Spotify isn't affiliated with Apple, but from what I've been able to gather, Platoon has access to getting on all of their playlists as well. To contrast it, this is what an artist who isn't an industry plant has on their Spotify page. This is an independent rapper named Bazanji that you should check out. He has 153,000 followers and 1.3 million monthly listeners. And this is about a 10% or higher monthly listener to follower ratio, which is normal. And if you look at the playlist he's discovered on, there's only one that is a Spotify editorial, which is Need for Speed. An artist with this many followers, many more than Aaron Smith, in a normal and fair world would get more playlisting from Spotify editorials than someone who has no fan base. But that isn't the case. Another independent rapper, Convoke, that you should check out, he has 1.3 million monthly listeners and 130,000 followers. There's that 10% follower to monthly listener ratio again, which is normal. A look at the playlist he's discovered on, and only one is a Spotify editorial, and it's this Russian playlist. Same goes here. If you're this big, you would ideally be getting more support from Spotify, not less than a no-name artist that happens to be signed to a company that pushes out industry plans and is owned and funded by Apple. This isn't even the fun part. I found the next artist on their roster that they're pushing with the same strong initial push that they gave Billie Eilish, and her name is Holly Humberstone, also signed to Platoon. Just by the look, you're probably getting the same energy and vibe, but if we take a look at her Spotify About page, it reads, in a span of months, Holly has amassed well over 35 million streams on Spotify, performed on Jimmy Kimmel Live, been named Apple Music's Up Next Artist, sold out her first 3 headlining gigs at Omiara in London, which has a capacity of 300 people, garnered radio play from BBC Radio 1, KCRW, Beats 1, Triple J, and more, and most recently blazed onto Rolling Stone's Breakthrough 25 chart as one of the fastest rising artists of the month. She's also been championed by Vivo Discover, Clash, NME, BBC Introducing, Billboard, DIY Magazine, Dork Magazine, Coup de Main Magazine, and the New York Times. Taking inspiration from Damien Rice, Lorde, Bon Iver, Phoebe Bridges, Haim, and everyone in between, Holly's style has an honest and conversational tone which immediately steals your attention, fusing the warmth of the acoustic music Holly grew up listening to with a darker, wonky electric twist. Once again, as you can see, the playlists she's been discovered on are all Spotify editorial playlists, and when you look at a ratio of followers to monthly listeners, it is significantly under 10%. It's about 2%. So how the hell is this girl getting all this press? And it has all happened within the past year. Prior to October of 2019, she was an absolute nobody. As a matter of fact, she released her first song on January 30th of 2020. The whole claim to fame is that Lewis Capaldi shared her song Deep End on his Instagram story back in December of 2019. She says on this Facebook post, "Thanks so much to Lewis Capaldi for sharing my tune Deep End today on Insta. So mad. Here's me playing it in my room today." I said the song didn't release until the end of January, so how did he post it in December? Well, she had herself performing an acoustic version. If you go to her channel and the comments on that specific video, you can see people commenting, "Lewis Capaldi just posted your channel on his Instagram story." If you're not familiar with Lewis Capaldi, he's basically a huge star from the UK. He had this really big song, Someone You Loved, that you've most likely heard at least once. But funny enough, it's a strange coincidence that he just finds this video and decides to post it on his Instagram story. And then he brings her on his tour. Her most popular music video on YouTube for her debut song, Deep End, has comments saying Niall Horan from One Direction sent them there from his Instagram story. Doja Cat was listening to the song on live. This song randomly appeared thanks to the algorithm. Some people got it as an ad, etc. She performs her 2 songs at the time for Jimmy Kimmel, and the music video, or the video I should say, only has 36k views of the performance. She's put on the cover of New Music Daily on Apple Music, and her music on that playlist. Apple Music host Rebecca Judd says, "I feel like I witnessed Holly Humberstone's career unfold right in front of me. So did I. She was one of my first ever ascending artists on the show earlier on in the year, when she had literally just released her first ever single. How fortunate. To see her go from strength to now, be Apple Music's up next artist, has been so beautiful to watch. Her talent and songwriting is undeniable, and the way she effortlessly writes about love and life makes her one of the most exciting artists around right now." Humberstone added, "Being an Apple Up Next artist and being supported by Apple Music is so huge to me. I feel like I'm still at an early stage in my career and just so overwhelmed with love. Really lucky to have such an amazing team of people backing me. I remember watching Clairo's performance on Jimmy Kimmel over and over this time last year and thinking how amazing it was and wanted that so much for myself. And a year on, I get to do all this cool stuff too. Thank you so much, Apple Music, for letting me do all this. I'm so full of love and excited to be a part of this." You would think that an artist that is getting all of this press, all of this playlisting, all of these cosigns from stars in the music industry would have a ton of fans, but that's not the case at all. There are SoundCloud rappers that have more fans than her. But this is all the process of building her fan base through these industry plant means. But keep in mind, they also need to make sure to paint that organic come-up story like they did for Billie Eilish. And they do a great job of that in her New York Times article. After high school, she spent a year at a performing arts college in Liverpool before dropping out to move back home. By that time, though, she was already beginning to work on her own music, commuting to London for her burgeoning career. Eventually, she crossed paths with Milton. She and her friends had been fans of his earlier indie pop band, Dog Is Dead, which put out music around a decade ago. Rather than working in sleek London studios, they collaborated in the basement of his home in Nottingham, building her sound from the ground up. Rather than signing to a label, Humberstone made a deal with Platoon, an artist services company that also placed early bets on Georgia Smith and Eilish. "I do think Holly is a lot like Billie," said Denzel Feigelson. "So do I," Platoon's founder in a phone interview. "They have a sense about them as to their mood and their emotions and how they write their songs." During the months that Humberstone has been back at home, she's been chipping away at promotional work, music videos, social media clips, sometimes with her family helping out behind the scenes. The result has been a DIY feeling rollout, an unintended, fitting consequence of being stuck in your childhood home as you're on the verge of outgrowing it for good. It's already mapped out for her. She spent a year at art college, then dropped out and moved back home, and going back and forth to London, but worked in the basement of her producer, Milton, building their sound up. It's so similar to the whole Billie Eilish story, except the age. It's insane. It screams, "We are authentic," and is really easy to get behind if you're a fan. but makes no mention of how much mainstream support she's getting or how she acquired the mainstream support. That always has to remain a mystery because it punctures a hole in this huge bubble of mystery, which is the transition from being some girl who was making music in someone's basement to suddenly on tour with a global superstar. It appeals so much to people because that is how the majority think of life. Their idea isn't that of Kaizen or getting 1% better every day to reach your goals. It's that one day some magic event is going to happen where I get everything I want. There are people in their late 20s and even in their 30s that still one day believe they're going to be rich. But the path they're on makes it impossible for that to happen. This is what the lottery preys on as well. And plenty of music artists think some event like this will happen to them, so they go from unknown to suddenly making millions, which is unrealistic. The majority of professional music artists did not have that happen to them. But this story is presented so much, people accept it as the normal thing. Painting this story makes it even easier to support artists that are industry plants because subconsciously, people tell themselves, wow, I was or I am in that exact same similar position. Maybe some stroke of luck will hit me too. Platoon has moved into a burgeoning market in music, and that is Africa. For the past 3 years, Platoon has been striking licensing and service deals with acts in countries like South Africa, Ghana, and Nigeria, offering advances, distribution, and support to 88 African musicians, and quietly becoming a major player amid an industry-wide shift toward establishing a larger footprint on the continent. Fiegelson has also been exploring new kinds of offerings that position the company as a one-stop finishing school that can make artists the CEOs of, well, themselves. I want artists to be able to manage their music on our platform, get services like healthcare, legal and accounting, learn about publishing, touring, how you market, and conquer things like YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, says Fiegelson. Because if I help them grow their businesses, it's only helping us grow our business too. And we're doing that in all kinds of ways. This is no surprise and gives some sort of support to my hypothesis that Apple is trying to build a wave of self-sufficient artists who won't need record labels, and that will benefit them as well in the long run. African music is very popular in the UK, Europe, and even in some places in Latin America. While it may not have really permeated into the United States yet, it has massive potential, and they're tapping into that potential. Funny enough, one of the new African acts they're working with, or basically planting, is Nissi, who is famous African artist Burna Boy's sister. On August 9th, Nissi posted to her Instagram, "Thank you everybody, Ignite is trending on all music platforms." It shows it on all these playlists on her Instagram post, but if you go to Spotify, where you can see the actual plays of the song, it only has 38,000 plays. How is it possible that it could be trending on Spotify with that few plays? Not just Spotify, but all platforms. I'm sure some of you watching this are artists that have hit that number or more. Were you trending? If we take a look at her About page, we can see that all of the playlists she's discovered on are Spotify editorial playlists. She has 748 followers and 16,000 monthly listeners, which is about a 4% ratio. But one very clever thing they're doing with her page is that they're putting her on playlists that have a smaller following. And I think this is to grow her fan base in a way that seems organic. If they suddenly put her on playlists with millions upon millions of followers, it's kind of like overdosing it. But regardless, this artist is clearly not hot by any means when you look at these numbers. On YouTube, the music video for her song Ignite, released on September 22nd, 2020, has 531,000 views and 462 likes on it. That ratio is entirely off. And it only has 63 comments as well. So they're inflating the numbers for her and will likely continue to do so. It's funny that in the Billboard article it reads, Fiegelson says that Platoon pitches its artists to all digital service providers equally, without favor from Apple, and doesn't get access to Apple Music data beyond what the company shares with all of its partners. I believe the second part of the data and what it shares with its partners. But yeah, I'm quite sure they don't get favor from Apple when Mr. Easy was an Up Next artist who was one of their signees. Billie Eilish was an Up Next artist who was one of their signees. Holly Humberstone is an Up Next artist who's one of their signees. And Victoria Monet, also an Up Next artist, one of their signees. It also just so happens that all of their artists' entire Discovered On playlists just so happen to be Spotify editorial playlists, even for tiny artists. They have more editorial playlisting than independent artists with millions of plays on their music and hundreds of thousands of followers on Spotify. Remember when I briefly touched on Rory in the beginning of this video? He was the one who wore an Industry Plant t-shirt for his XXL freshman cover. Well, he was the first signee to the now record label and management company LVR & Co., or Love Renaissance. I thought it was his company from how much he promoted it when he got on. But after Rory's debut album All We Need flopped, rumored to have sold 700 copies first week, things got quiet for him. It was one of the best debut albums of the past decade, if you're interested in checking it out. Rory blended folk and hip-hop so amazingly well, and it's refreshing to hear even today when everything sounds so similar in the genre. But Rory was never the individual to be controlled, and he said himself when he was trying to get dropped by his record label. Our interview didn't last long, but during our conversation, Rory revealed that after a 2-year struggle with his label, Columbia Records, and management, Atlanta's own Love Renaissance, he asked both parties to release him from his contracts. I want out of the label when the people who believed in me transition jobs to be replaced by strangers who don't know me, Rory explained in detail in the follow-up email. I went to Coachella without any support from the label. It was like they were trying to put me in a position of fear and weakness so I could run out of money and they could control me. I would rather die than be controlled. I would rather take my career on a path where I can play with my friends, stay with my family, and remain physically, psychologically, and spiritually well. I'm sick and bored with everything these record labels have been offering fans, he continued. The fans are not having fun. The artists may love the fans, but the management and label don't. So the relationship between the fan and artist is built like God and worshiper, when it should be artists serving the people. Sadly, they tell us to come into this square, oppressive, dark, dingy building, get sweaty and drunk, and be told to put our hands up and jump. I think the fan is worthy of more of an experience. In a series of tweets Rory sent out, he said, "Thanks for getting me to where you got me, LVRN, Justice, Junia, Carlin, Sean, Jimmy, Gotti, Trevin, Sean P., Michael Holt, Kipper, Hilson. Forever family. Truth is, we just were never the same from day one, and I was always destined for something else. And so are y'all. But I wish it didn't have to hurt so much. I wish y'all would have told me y'all wish to focus on Drum and Black, and I should sort it out. But yeah, truth is, Spirit didn't align with y'all to be the one that managed Rory. You could never and would never get my purpose." From what I was able to gather from detailed research and study on Love Renaissance, Rory was the prototype for what they were building, which was their own stable of industry plants that they have succeeded with every single one after him. I initially found out about Six Lack through Rory. I thought Rory had signed him, but they had different plans for Six Lack, who himself was an industry plant. Everyone on Love Renaissance roster is an industry plant. Six Lack's breakout song Problems was initially released on the LVRN YouTube channel on June 5th, 2016. It was only a couple of months before it was everywhere, thanks to support from Apple Music playlisting. From Apple Music's inception, Carl Sherry was working there, eventually becoming head of artist curation before he would leave to be head of urban music at Spotify in May of 2018. But during his time at Apple, the first artist he broke was Bryson Tiller. And I'm sure many of you asked, how did Bryson Tiller go from being a nobody to suddenly his first album is an Apple Music exclusive, his first project, and he's everywhere? Six Lack came to Apple's attention courtesy of Carl Sherry, a music journalist who joined Apple as the company prepared for the introduction of Apple Music. Sherry identifies artists with the potential to be stars and champions them within Apple, pushing for their music to be featured on playlists, on the radio, and in commercials. Sherry was instrumental in the success of Bryson Tiller and Chance the Rapper, two acts he met well before they gained mainstream success. Their rise to stardom earned Sherry a promotion to oversee all artist curation at Apple Music. Carl got notoriety for what Apple Music did for Bryson, recalled Tunde Balogun, 6 Lack's manager and a leader of Atlanta music company Love Renaissance. Balogun talks to Sherry every week and introduced him to 6 Lack with a copy of 2 singles, Problems and Bless Me. Problems stuck out as an inevitable hit, so Sherry placed the song on the Mood playlist. Problems ranked as one of the 100 most popular songs on Apple Music within a couple of days. I've never seen anything that fast from someone no one knows, Sherry said. The song would eventually spend 16 weeks on the Billboard charts. Balogun now considers Sherry a member of 6 Lack's team. With the promotion from Apple, this summer is shaping up to be the biggest moment of 6 Lack's career. Next week, after the performance on Corden's show, 6 Lack will go on tour with the pop star of the weekend and hip-hop duo Ray Shremmerd. He will use data from Apple and its rivals to help decide when to release new music and where to tour. What a privilege he's provided. Streaming services are where you discover music, Balogun said. They are a one-stop shop that gives you better tools to help your artists succeed. There are tons of people who had Apple Music at that time, and Problems was a song by 6 Lack that you couldn't escape. It was everywhere. Similarly with Bryson Tiller's Don't. 3 songs released under LVRN for 6 Lack, and he is suddenly on all of these playlists, is getting all of these write-ups, and everyone is essentially forced to check him out after that. And don't take it from me, Carl Sherry said it himself. The objective is to really start a fire and have a song chart, Sherry says. Every time I premiere a song, I'm putting all my weight behind it to start some momentum for that song and artist. Let's take 6 Lack for example. Even though he's pre-cosign, 6 Lack was an artist that had absolutely no following. I may be extreme in saying that, but nobody knew who he was. And within his first week, Problems got 1 million streams. That's a metric. Within the first week, a guy that no one had heard about had the number 3 song on the R&B charts in the iTunes store. He sold 10,000 copies independently. And then he was the number 6 streaming song on the chart. That was back in May. I always joke that 6 Lack benefited from an accelerated and advanced Bryson formula, just because I was able to do it quicker. But I was reaching out to all these people, like Republic's Charlie Walk, or Atlantic's Dallas Martin, or whoever, and saying, have you heard of this guy? I've never seen a song move that fast on Apple Music. And everyone's reaction was the same. Who is this guy? I've never heard of him, but this song is fire. When I started with 6 Lack, I put it on one music playlist called Mood. The playlist started with Rihanna's Needed Me, and then right after that you had 6 Lack's Problems. It was the second song. Imagine that, one of Rihanna's biggest songs that had released at that time. If pretty much anyone who had a decent song played after that, don't you think they would get a ton of attention? And 2 days later I was looking at the charts, and all of a sudden I see Problems. It was like number 69 or something. That was an indicator. If it's just doing that off one playlist, what happens if I put my whole weight behind it? They're plain as day telling us that yes, I have the power and access to all of these playlists, and if I like something, I'm going to turn it into a hit. It's a plug and play game at this point, and it's worse than anything we've ever seen in music history, because this individual has a direct distribution channel, or at the time had a direct distribution channel, to nearly 100 million if on Apple Music. But that's not Spotify, which is over 300 million, which is where he's currently at now. There has never been direct access to that many people you can put a song or album in front of ever. Not even close. Radio, even back then, there were tons of different stations, and even record labels had to approach all of these different stations and networks. Remember how I mentioned that a ton of these artists signed to Platoon were getting Up Next features on Apple Music? Well, guess who the first was to ever get this? Yes, 6 Lack, signed to LVRN, back in April of 2017. Apple Inc. is introducing a program to promote young musicians with a month-long barrage of videos, playlists, and new music, deepening the technology giant's direct investment in artists through Apple Music. The first performer to benefit from the Up Next program is 6 Lack, a 24-year-old Atlanta singer who released his debut album last fall. On Thursday, Apple released a short documentary about 6 Lack, as well as video of a live recording session taped in Atlanta in an interview on Beats One, Apple Music's radio station. Beats One host Zane Lowe will introduce 6 Lack on James Corden's late-night talk show Thursday evening on CBS. And of course, and over the course of the next month, Apple will promote 6 Lack's songs on Apple Music playlists, Beats One, and the iTunes Store. Similar promotions with other artists will follow in the months to come. Apple executives hope the campaign will attract more artists and customers to its 2-year-old music service, which has signed up more than 20 million customers since June 2015. With rivals YouTube, Pandora Media, and Spotify all offering support to musicians, Cupertino, California-based Apple is eager to show artists it can help them become stars, and to lure fans with exclusive video and music. This isn't much different from what they did with Summer Walker. I won't get into too much detail on her in this video, because I made an entire detailed video on her titled The Story of Summer Walker. It will be in the top right cards, you can check it out there. But she had no fans or anything, and then suddenly she's a star on all of these playlists and has features with all of these artists. And yes, she too was named Apple Music's Up Next artist in January of 2019. The inevitable and tired retort that people instinctively come out with is, who cares if they're an industry plant, if the music is good? That music being good or not is subjective, and if you don't have enough self-respect to dislike the fact that you're being deceived by people presenting to you an organic growth of an artist when they were anything but, then you should at least look at the second-order thinking of something like this. There's also the question of whether or not you care about independent artists who don't have connections, because how are they going to compete when they're in a race with only one leg compared to the luxuries all these artists I've shown today are getting? First order thinking is, okay, so what? I'm getting good music forced onto me. That's great. But second order thinking is, if these entities can tell you exactly what to listen to, then they can also tell you exactly what not to listen to. And now it's a matter of control. We've already seen this happen to 2 rappers this year, 6ix9ine being the first, who I did a very detailed video on his downfall, with streaming services shutting him down. It'll be in the top right cards, go check it out. I said he was only the test run in that video, and there would be many more to come. And the second was Tory Lanez. Carl Sherry was one of the individuals 6ix9ine called out as blackballing him from any playlisting. Take a look at this clip from a conversation Joe Budden and DJ Academics were having on Instagram Live.
The part the public misses is a lot of these big-time companies, academics, will change their whole business model right before your very eyes. Listen, a few years back, Spotify was all about the consumer experience. Spotify was all about making the consumer happy. Somehow it went from that to playlisting. Playlisting was the big bet, right? Yep. And then it went from that to something else. When this switches, people switch. The goals switch.
Spotify at one point was about the consumer and user experience, optimizing it for them, seeing what they enjoy listening to, and trying to give them more of that. But it transitioned now into telling them what to listen to, with all of these playlists they're pushing. And this is a great time to pull up this image or graph. This is called the law of diffusion of innovation. And it's a theory that explains how, why, and the speed at which new ideas or technologies spread. A good example of this was the repopularization of Hush Puppies, the shoe that is covered in Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. In 1994, sales of the shoe were down to 30,000 pairs a year, and only very small shoe stores like mom and pop shops, as well as thrift stores, were stocking them. And this is when the hipsters in Lower Manhattan started buying them up, because they wanted to look unique. These are the innovators. They seek what nobody else is doing, and they hop on it. They would wear these shoes to the bars and clubs, and people started to want them because these hip, young adults were wearing them. These are the early adopters, the people that followed the hipsters. Some of which were fashion designers that began to feature these shoes in their collections. But then something strange happened. At a fashion shoot, 2 Hush Puppies executives ran into a stylist from New York who told them the classic Hush Puppies had suddenly become hip in the clubs and bars of downtown Manhattan. Fans were buying Hush Puppies at resale shops in the Village and Soho. Designer John Bartlett suddenly requested that Hush Puppies recreate its signature patterns in bright colors for his February 1995 New York Fashion Week show. Next, Manhattan designer Anna Sui called Hush Puppies for multicolored runway shoes. Los Angeles designer Joel Fitzgerald installed a 25-foot inflatable Hush Puppies-inspired basset hound on the roof of his Hollywood store and gutted an adjacent art gallery to create an organic Hush Puppies boutique. Paul Rubens bought a couple of pairs of suede shoes at the boutique. Word spread, the big dogs were barking. Once the fashion shows put them out there, the early majority now hops on them because they follow the trends dictated by the early adopters. And from there, everyone comes. You can see the chasm, or the chasm, or the tipping point. So this shoe went from selling 30,000 a year to 430,000 pairs in 1995, and in 1996, well over 1 million pairs. This is exactly how platforms like Spotify, Apple Music really blew up. Apple Music not so much because it had the brand behind it. Spotify had to build from the ground up. Spotify cared a lot early on about giving real die-hard music lovers, who were the innovators, the best experience possible. They needed to do so because they had barely any users. These are the music lovers that type in the search bar the exact artist they want to listen to, not clicking on some playlist and seeing what someone else has put on the menu for them. The type to scour SoundCloud for hidden gems, to check out Bandcamp and see what new music there is on there. This is the small segment of the population that got platforms like Spotify off its feet and attracted the early adopters. They continued the same approach, but there came a point in time, like Joe Budden is talking about, when Spotify went way past the tipping point, way past the chasm, and if I had to guesstimate, they're somewhere around the late majority right now. Once you pass that early majority, those innovators that were so powerful, meaningful, and important to your business in its inception, and you were trying to satisfy them, become disposable. After all, they only make up 2.5% or less of your base, and they've been using the platform for so long, it's unlikely that they leave. And even if they do leave, who cares, right? They've run their course and served their purpose. And now Spotify, as well as Apple Music, go from optimizing the listener and consumer experience to give them what they want, to telling them what to listen to and dictating that for them. The scales of power have tipped all the way to the other side. And that's where the power comes to blackball certain artists, such as 6ix9ine and Tory Lanez. It's important to note that Spotify said this exact quote in their statement. We created concern that an allegation might affect artists' chances of landing on a Spotify playlist and negatively impact their future. Some artists even worried that mistakes made in their youth would be used against them. That's not what Spotify is about. We don't aim to play judge and jury. We aim to connect artists and fans, and Spotify playlists are a big part of how we do that. Leaving the fact that 6ix9ine served his time, and the only quote-unquote crime he committed was that of telling, we go to Tory Lanez, whose surprise album Daystar, while it was #1 on Apple Music, trending at #1, it received 0 editorial playlisting from Spotify as well as Apple Music, and was not even put on the new releases section of Apple Music. Everything that happened to Tory Lanez up until that point in time was an allegation. He was not arrested, nor was he charged for what Megan Thee Stallion and everyone else was accusing him, but also playing judge and jury. Things have changed now, but at the time, keep in mind, there was 0 proof other than someone's word. But I want to know, what is the rule? Is it beating or shooting at females? If so, then NLE Choppa has a tweet that is still up, where he says, I shot at that hoe before she got pregnant. in reference to his baby mother. He was on the cover of Get Turned playlist on Spotify. He's currently getting editorial playlisting on both Spotify and Apple Music. The same thing with NBA YoungBoy, who there's video footage of him throwing his girlfriend against the wall and when she had a black eye, but he's on every single editorial playlist. I'm not saying to remove Untitled Chapter or YoungBoy. I want them both to continue having success and be placed on all these playlists alongside rappers like 6ix9ine and Tory Lanez if they have hot songs. Because the way things are going right now, not only is it unfair, it's picking and choosing, and this is where the power comes in. That was 2 years ago when TDE came in and threatened to pull their music from Spotify. Well over 2 years ago, 2.5. Let's say TDE tried to do the same thing on behalf of Tory Lanez this year. Do you think Spotify and or Apple Music would comply? I wouldn't be surprised if Spotify said, okay, see you later, we don't care. Because it would be TDE losing out on a ton of money. Playlisting has been compared to radio, but it's way more powerful than radio. It has the music discovery of SoundCloud and radio, but it also pays. So it's blended in with music sales. If you're not getting the playlisting, you're missing out on so much music sales, and Apple Music and Spotify have trained the consumer to not buy music. Check out this clip of Denzel Feigelson from 2007 at the same talk I introduced in the beginning of this video.
And as I know from having the lucky seat of working with a company like iTunes, you know, what we see as the major competition are the people who are downloading for free. And I don't think it's ever something that will go away. You know, free is a very difficult thing to pass down. However, as we provide better and better services for consumers, we'll get them away from free. And really that is the key, is to provide a better customer user experience.
Spotify and Apple Music, alongside YouTube, have nearly eliminated piracy of music, which was at an all-time high not too long ago. There were several reasons for piracy. The first was pricing. People didn't want to pay for every single album that released. It would put too much of a dent in their pockets. The second was convenience. It came to a point where people would rather just have a digital version of the music to put on their iPod or iPhone, and CDs were a massive pain. But also, people couldn't justify paying for something that wasn't a tangible object like a CD. But over time, Spotify and Apple Music made the customer experience so great, including the 3-month free trial that Apple Music gave and the free version of Spotify, that even people who used to pirate everything organized their whole iTunes library. They saw the convenience and said, $10 a month or $5 a month if I'm a student is such a steal in terms of pricing, and the value is so high that it's worth just paying this instead of continue to pirate music. And that's dangerous, because whenever we're sold convenience or comfort, it makes it easier to control us. From all things like privacy when it comes to applications like Facebook. And in the case of music streaming, once you've bought into it, it's unlikely for you to go back to how things were. And now Apple Music and Spotify are in control of telling you exactly what to listen to, and it's almost as if they make it difficult to authentically discover something new. And the question becomes, are people like Larry Jackson and Carl Sherry the ones who get to decide who and what people do or do not listen to? And just keep in mind, if you're the type of individual that doesn't check out playlists, you are in the absolute minority. You're less than 1%. 99% of people just use these playlists because it's convenient. It's totally up to their discretion whether they like you or not. And if they do not like you, in the case of Tory Lanez and 6ix9ine, then they can hurt your pockets and reach. Centralized power like that is something the music industry does not need. Because at this current point in time, it looks like gatekeepers and blackballing is stronger than it ever was in history, and I only see it getting worse from here. Independent artists will suffer the most, because if an artist is signed to a major record label, then if they're blackballed or not shown any support, the head, being Universal, Warner, or Sony, could make a phone call to Spotify or Apple. they could threaten to pull their entire catalog if Spotify doesn't comply, which is not the same as TDE pulling their catalog. Those big three players own nearly the entire music catalog out there. But if you're independent, nobody's going to bat for you. And what's worse is that these companies, mainly Universal and Sony, own a stake in Spotify as a company. Warner sold all their shares in Spotify, getting over $500 million for it. So in the case of Universal, Sony, and Spotify, their interests are aligned. When have record labels ever had ownership in not only their music, but radio stations as well, which is the playlist, and the music shops, and the record stores? And what's the equivalent of record stores in large scale, since streams pay out money and make up the majority of music industry revenue that continues to go up year after year? At this point in time, YouTube as a platform is the only one that has shown itself to be unbiased in the case of what people perceive artists as bad or good. They allowed for 6ix9ine's song to accumulate views, be recommended, and get on trending, as well as Tory Lanez song to accumulate views, be recommended, and get top 3 on trending. It has come to a point where we as listeners decide to either sacrifice the convenience of Apple Music and or Spotify because what they're doing and continue doing is wrong and hurts the future of independent artists or those that don't have these connections. Because after all, a record label only has stronger negotiating power over an artist who's unsigned when it tells them that they may be self-sufficient right now, but they have almost no chance of getting in Spotify editorial playlists unless they sign to them, as if they needed any more leverage. But even if people were in an uproar and canceled their accounts, it would likely only be the innovators. The majority of people don't know, and if they did know, they don't care unless it's harming them. So, is it too late? Apple Music and Spotify went from how can we best service the consumer and connect artists with fans to planning artists, essentially forcing people to listen to them and playing judge, jury, and executioner with those they perceive as unnecessary and they don't like. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Please give this video a like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Peace.